Today's workshop slash masterclass is what we're calling modeling and data visualization with core apps. So this is a course that Emil and I have taught for, I'd say, a couple of years now in various forms, and it's kind of evolved as the number of applications for data visualization we've kind of built a course studio has increased, and the number of software that we're touching on has increased as well. And so in the sequence today, what we're going to kind of do is we're going to start off in a little bit of Grasshopper with kind of a prototype little tower we've made. You know, it looks very similar to something SOM made a while ago, but it's a very kind of clean geometry to begin with. And we're not going to spend too much time on the Grasshopper definition because what's kind of important there is understanding how to move that geometry and associated data out into the visualization platforms that we're going to be looking at today. So we'll be going through and looking at how to export 3D models to Mirar, which is our kind of lightweight BIM 3D model viewer. And then we'll be looking at how to take that model and kind of set up a shareable experience with Mirar, where you can either work internally with a team, for yourself, or with clients to begin to look at that 3D model and its associated data. We'll then look at how you can take that data down and bring it up into another app we've created called Thread, which is basically kind of a lightweight Power BI or Tableau kind of aimed at the AEC industry. So it allows you to explore, filter, share, and present data visualizations in conjunction with 3D models and images. So after that, we'll pivot a little bit, and we're going to look at an app we released last year, I believe, called Swarm. And Swarm was basically our kind of first attempt at putting Grasshopper on the web and kind of creating a cloud compute platform that allowed us to integrate Grasshopper computing into multiple different applications, including Revit and Illustrator, as well as Rhino, obviously. And Swarm is actually merging with Shapediver. I don't know if anyone's familiar with using Shapediver. So we're still showing Swarm because the merger is in process between the two platforms, but a lot of the workflows and the kind of ideas of how we're going to work with the models are still going to be valid. Just the kind of platform, the UI will be changing. So still thought it was kind of a good idea to go through that process because we found it to be very valuable in our kind of day-to-day work. And the last thing we'll be doing today is we'll be introducing a new platform that's out as of less than a month ago called Trace. And what Trace is basically doing is it's trying to keep building information modeling data available at the drawing phase. So as everyone knows, when you export out your content to PDFs, it's essentially dead. You lose all the data and you're just left with the line works and the graphics. And this is kind of a platform looking at maintaining the data with the actual drawn elements. So we'll explore that a little bit. So as I kind of showed already, there's kind of two pages here. One, which is just all the installations. So if you haven't signed up for a Core Apps account yet, then please go ahead and do that. And I'll take a minute. I'll take a second in just a minute to go through and make sure everyone's approved for everything. And then for each one of the apps, once you're approved, Mirar, Thread, Swarm, and Trace, you can just kind of go and sign in and make sure you have access, and we'll go through that. Each one of those apps has their own kind of download section for plugins for different applications. So after today's workshop, if you want to try it in Revit or you want to run Swarm in Illustrator or something like that, you can always go back and use those installers. And as Revit's new versions come out, or Illustrator as well, we tend to update that as frequently as we can. For today, we just bundled it all up in a Google Drive folder that you can download, and that has all the installers for the desktop plugins. And if you have any issues with those, feel free to ask, and Emil can either pop out into a breakout room, or I can, depending on who's presenting, or we can just go through it real quick on screen if several people are having issues. And the last little thing is there are a series of Grasshopper sample files available. If you want to start with those, that's basically what we'll just be using as a template for the uploads today. But feel free at any time, to try out your own models or try anything you want to kind of deviate from that. But that's just kind of the background we'll be using for all this. I don't know, Emil, did you want to add anything?
No, that sounds great. That's perfect. Thanks a lot. And as you already mentioned, I mean, if anyone has any questions, feel free to just speak out and let us know.
So real quick to talk about a little bit of background. So Core Studio was started several years ago at Thornton Tomasetti by Robert Atani, and at that time Jonathan Schumacher. and Ben House. And the group was originally at kind of advanced computational modeling, and over the years has kind of evolved out to application development, exploration, artificial intelligence, working on kind of high-end conceptual projects for TT as part of competitions. And the group has grown to about a little over 20 now in several locations around the world. I can't keep track of it anymore, particularly post-COVID where everyone's at. And so it's a really interesting group because the background of Core Studio is a mixture between engineers, computer scientists, a lot of architects, or as I like to call them, recovering architects, and also a few other people from some kind of a more varied backgrounds, all kind of coming together. And part of our mission at this point is really kind of develop technology more generally for the AEC space than directly for Thornton Tomasetti, which has been a really great kind of evolution of the studio and allows us, I think, to reach out to a broader range of people and get a better understanding of what the industry needs. And so, part of the hope with AEC Tech every year is that, in building the connections between everyone here and everyone who participates is getting more feedback so that, one, we kind of better understand how to evolve and develop our work so that it's more beneficial to the overall industry. The applications have grown to quite a few different ones at this point. So we kind of have 4 trajectories, which we're realizing we need to branch out on now. 4 isn't quite covering it anymore. That kind of look at mainly interoperability and visualization and automation. So these are kind of the areas where a lot of the external facing products that we create exist. And then internally, we also have a lot of work on what we call structures AI, which are apps kind of developed to better help Thornton Tomasetti engineers, complete the work and really kind of push the envelope of what's possible. Recently, we had an interesting foray into actually developing an open source kind of, I don't know what you call it, logistical app called Healthy Reentry, which is basically to allow people or companies to kind of track where they think their COVID status might be in terms of exposure or who is adjacent to who at a time. And we've had several different firms globally kind of begin to use this to kind of help them just manage understanding in large organizations how this has been impacting. As I mentioned before, one of the other apps kind of at the perimeter Swarm is actually one that's going through an evolution right now, joining Shape Diver. And Construe is kind of the interoperability platform for both the, the engineering software. I'm forgetting the acronym for it,
Finite element.
There we go. Thank you, Emil. Difference between the engineer and the architect here. So that app is a commercial product that's been out there for a while, but really is Revit interoperability with these different kind of platforms and applications. And lately, we've had a lot of growth around the AI space and kind of have several projects kind of out there which are kind of worth checking out and seeing where we're trying to figure out how to better provide access to basic artificial intelligence or machine learning training sets through a more simplified interface. So that's something to keep an eye out for over the next year or so. And Emil, I don't know if there's anything you want to add to that.
No, I think that's a great summary. I mean, it's obviously a bit of a exercise just trying to group all these different little projects, but I think this is a pretty nice visualization of just all the stuff that we have going. And it's all it's obviously like having it sorted by these different areas is obviously one type of arrangement, but many of these applications have different kind of stages when it comes to development. Like some are kind of earlier, phases in terms of like alpha, beta. Some of them are more sort of mature, but it's a pretty good overview of the stuff we're into and up to.
So the apps we're going to be covering today are all kind of in the visualization category, and the kind of main public apps that we have out there are all within the space. And when I first joined Core Studio, coming from at that time Grimshaw Architects and 10 years kind of practicing the architecture side before, what I found really interesting about these applications is, I'd done a lot of Grasshopper work at those places over the years, and you can get really fast at Grasshopper, but the speed bump was always then how do you visualize that data and the model, and how do you communicate the results of either simulations or kind of, BIM information development, or all this kind of complex data that's getting loaded into, or even simple data that's getting loaded into models these days. It's always a trick of like baking it out, rendering it, putting a chart next to it, maybe getting something into Power BI. And, there's been a lot of exciting developments in this space as well. Nate Miller from the Proving Ground has put out a lot of tools around this lately, which are pretty fantastic as well. But, the big pain point was always, how do you kind of cleanly get this information out there? And then how do you make it interactive so you're not kind of having to pre-anticipate configurations of finding the best balance between this factor and that factor within a building. And so the development of these 3 apps we're primarily going to be looking at today is really about not just the kind of generation of model geometry, but more the kind of visualization and exploration of data and models together. So the first app we're going to look at coming out of Grasshopper is Mirar. And so this is just a little preview. Everyone's probably already gone to the previews for this, but this basically just shows kind of what the app does. This is one of the first kind of public-facing apps that Core Studio put out. So it's changed a little bit over the last couple of years, but the experience is maintained being relatively the same. But essentially what it allows you to do is to load your attributes onto 3D geometry, and then easily kind of explore and click through those attributes and then color a model and begin to preview it with that information and data. And then as that kind of developed and merged with another project that Core Studio open sourced several years ago called Design Explorer, which is still out as an open source project, the idea became, how do we actually create a dashboard where we can have kind of increased filtering and allow for essentially the creation and curation of workspaces around not just the kind of model geometry, but also the data itself. So how do we find a way to kind of blend the kind of BIM models and then ultimately BIM drawings that are being created as part of that process, and kind of give a lot of the capability that's out there in kind of data visualization these days, but be able to queue it back to the model or back to images so that there's kind of that visual relationship between the design itself and then the actual data that's associated with it. The third app we'll be looking at today is one called Swarm, which is at this point a marketplace where you can go and basically either for yourself or publicly essentially create what we call apps, which are Grasshopper definitions on the web that you can run without actually having Rhino or Grasshopper on your machine. You can run it from your phone and also interact with other applications, including, as I think I've mentioned, Revit and Illustrator and a few of the other CSI tools for the engineers in the group. And you can have some of that same functionality in terms of combining attributes with model geometry that we've seen in some of the other kind of applications. But it's all kind of detached from an actual desktop and software platform so that you have the ability to kind of use these tools and actually create and author content without needing to be running Rhino or Revit in the background. And then the last application is very much hot off the presses, which is called Trace. And here we can see that it has a lot of that same functionality that Mirar had for 3D models, now in 2D drawings. So what you're seeing here is an export of a sheet from Revit, where all of the actual drawing information from that Revit drawing still maintains all of its BIM information, and then kind of actually be used to kind of click, explore, and navigate, and in future developments also begin to look at where things are in sheet set and really start to navigate drawings with the full BIM intelligence that Revit will be putting in there without actually having to be stuck in Revit waiting 10 minutes for a button click to actually return a result. So that's kind of the suite of apps we'll be looking at today. So before we actually jump into it, I just want to pause for a second, see if there's any questions or thoughts about that. All right, let's get to it then. So we're going to start off in Rhino. I'm running Rhino 6, but most of these applications, with the exception of Swarm, work in Rhino 7 as well. So it just depends on your preference. Swarm only works with Rhino 6. Emil, that's correct still, right?
Yes, it's safest to run it in Rhino 6. You can run it in Rhino 7 also, but it's at your own risk, so to speak.
And so we'll be running out of Rhino 6 today. And I'm just going to start off with some of the sample files. And the first two we're going to look at, I'm just going to run through really quickly and just kind of show how the actual kind of background tower file is set up. We won't be building it from scratch or anything like that. So I'm just going to start with AEC Tech 2020-01 Concept Tower GH. Okay. And in this sample file, we're basically just making, of course, a little twisted tower, because what else are you going to do in an AEC workshop except make a twisting tower? But it is easy to pull data from, so guiltily I fell back to it. But this is a pretty simple little model here just to talk through, and all we're really doing is we're going in and setting up a series of rectangles that are kind of positioned around the base of the tower here, and then we're positioning 4 other, oops, find the right spot. There we go. We're positioning 1 rectangle kind of around the corner. Then, because again, it's trying to be pretty lazy with this, we're just extruding it and actually using the twist command to twist it. And then we're going in afterwards and basically just mirroring and booleaning that all together into this kind of larger solid mass. So all the sample files for today are really kind of set up based on this one, where we're taking that one large geometry. Then what we ultimately wanted to do is, trying to think about this from the point of view of maybe setting up a concept or a early competition model, is that we might want to extract some basic information like floor plate areas, facade areas, potentially overlooking between windows within a design like this, and some of that other kind of more geometrically derived information. And then we want to associate that with each one of the floor plates so that, if we are doing a competition with a tower like this and we have a brief, we can start to match the numbers against that and understand, like, as we change the design around, what the implications are between one or multiple designs. So in the next little portion of this file, all we're doing down here is we're going in, we're taking that building mass, and then we're just using the contour command to basically slice it up into a series of floor plates. And then we're going in, turning those into surfaces, and then just extruding them out. And so we're extruding a couple different things in this file. We're extruding at the very end here floor volumes, where we're taking each floor and extruding it basically to the floor height there, so that we can kind of represent the full space when it comes to a mask model. And then in case we want to visualize it in different ways, we're also going in with the floor slabs and extruding those out, and then also adding, in this particular file, a very simple kind of glazing layer. And so this is when we kind of move this into our visualization model. We have a few different types of geometry that we can explore and click around with. One of the little things we're doing here at the beginning is also, instead of just extruding every floor plate to exactly the same height, we are trying to create a little bit of difference that might be more realistic to the way the tower design might take place. So at the base here, we're just creating a panel with a list of 4 unique floor heights at the beginning, in this case meters, 10, 5, 5, and 5, for potentially a program down here of a lobby, 2 retail floors, potentially an amenity floor, something like that, so that we're not just kind of generically chopping the tower up. We're getting something that might be a little bit closer to that type of stack. And we'll see as well later, one of the nice things about this is when we ultimately turn this into a swarm map, we can actually give the user the ability to add this information in on the web. So if they wanted to do 5 or 6 floors as kind of a live demonstration, potentially with a client or as part of a working team, you're building in some of that flexibility to have a little bit more realistic programming. After that, we're just setting up a repeating kind of floor stack of 8 office and then 1 mechanical space that just will repeat the rest of the way up of the tower. And this is just kind of giving us the kind of stacking of the overall building massing. What becomes important here, though, is, clean up my own file a little bit, is that we're creating a series of discrete geometry sets at the end of each one of these steps. So in this case, when we're looking at things like the floor outlines or the floor volumes, what we want to do is we want to make sure that we have the same number of items, in this case 58 reps, as the data points we're going to be pulling out. And this is really kind of the important thing, is as we move down here into this section where now we're starting to load attributes onto that drawing or pull information out of that drawing, is that we basically have the same number of data points, 58, that match each one of those floor plates, and we keep that in order. And that's just a really important thing to think about if you're using these types of tools to visualize the data, is that you actually keep the data points aligned, both in terms of sequence, but also in terms of matching the number of items, because Mirar isn't going to figure out how to associate the data with the actual geometry. You got to make sure to keep that stuff in the same order. So part of the reason the sample process is broken out is just to kind of show how that structure can be achieved. So some of the information we're pulling out here, it's very basic, is you know, we might want to know the perimeter or facade length along each one of the floors. So we're pulling out the curve length from our floor outlines. From the floor surfaces themselves, we're extracting some basic information. We're extracting the area of each one of those floor plates so that we can check our GFA and program distribution. We're also taking the center point here and we're getting its Z value so that we can visualize the floor plate heights and look at that afterwards. And then down here, we're taking each one of those floor plates, and inside of this little cluster, which we'll just open up real quick, we're just doing a few little things to go in and match up our programming so that we take the first few floors with those custom program types, and then we're just using this little repeat component here to just repeat that floor plate stack until we get to the total number of floors inside of that cluster. And so at this point, what we get over here, we turn off icons, is we're basically just getting attributes, which are the perimeter length, the floor plate area, floor height, floor program. And then the next ones down here begin to look at some of the facade geometry. So we're pulling out things like the glazing ratio, the surface area of glazing per floor relative to the floor area, the facade area for each one of those floor plates, the number of facade faces, how many unique kind of linear spans there are, and then facade overlooking. And all of these attributes may not be valuable on any given particular project, but this file is really kind of set up to just show how you can pull out a multitude of different data points and then begin to visualize them. The second file in the series just builds on that first file and has all the same data and same geometry, but in this file, we're just adding an additional section where we're creating a basic facade. Now, one of the nice things we'll see later when using Swarm is we can actually just use a Revit curtain wall to generate this facade. But if we're trying to use our facade for something like an analysis simulation or something like that, we're just doing a very basic little thing here. Let me hide everything real quick and turn it on, where we're just taking and dividing up that floor, each one of the lines of the facade outline into a series of little linear spans, and then just extruding those up more or less to create a series of very basic panels. And so what this will let us do is actually in our Mirar model that we're going to create in a minute, and the kind of full building tower example that's available in the presentation. This one just goes in and then adds that kind of facade element in so that you can have information that's not just per floor, but can actually be per facade panel. And really the point here is to kind of show that you can mix and match your different data types inside of Mirar. So obviously the facade isn't going to have something like GFA associated with it or floor plate area, but you can still have a model element with data associated with it uploaded. So that's just a really, really quick kind of cursory overview of what those Grasshopper files will kind of be using as the foundation do. But the really important thing here is kind of the way the information is clustered up at the top is we have all of our geometry up here, which are our different elements from our massing to our floor surfaces to our volumes. And then down below, we have two sets of data. We have facade related data, which is associated with each one of those panels. So that's 5,000 data points here. And then we have floor plate data that's associated with each one of those floor plates, which just happens to be 58 values. And the nice thing about this is, now if we go in and decide that we didn't want our tower to be 240, see if we can even find the tower. Probably help to turn a preview on. Okay, but you know, let's say we're back in 2008 and a little something happens and suddenly the size of the building has to be cut in half. So now we can basically see what would happen with that same design if we adjust the parametric building, and because of the way the model's built, we can go all the way over here to the end, and we can see now that our properties have updated so that our geometry and our data now only have 28 values. So, you know, as I'm sure all of you are aware, there are 1,000 different ways to do this, but this is kind of set up to just give us this kind of clean categorization between the geometry at the top here and then the attributes at the bottom down here. What we'll look at next is we'll look at now how to take this model and data attributes and begin to merge those together and upload to Mirar. But before we do that, are there any questions about these files so far, or anything you'd like to go a little bit more into? Didn't want to spend too much time on the Grasshopper stuff today. No.
Have you guys? What's your experience with using Grasshopper in general? Are you guys familiar with it, or is it expert level, or?
The files look pretty clear to me.
Use it a lot.
Yeah, I'm very experienced.
Excellent. That's great.
All right.
Cool. Yeah, maybe I take over then, share my screen. So before I actually jump into Grasshopper, I wanted to say a few words about the kind of platform, that being Mirar in general. I mean, Dave already gave an excellent presentation about the concepts, but the idea here is really to be able to visualize, 3D models and BIM models on, in the browser. And BIM here being, geometry plus attributes essentially, right? So, so what it does, I mean, you have, like, we will show the Grasshopper exporter workflow where you basically build your model inside of Grasshopper, and then you can push it up to Mirar. But we also have other types of exporters for Revit, I guess for some CSI products like SAP and so on. But they all kind of merge into the same kind of idea that you can quickly share information in 3D with other people in the project. And when you actually have it in the browser, there's just so much you can do in terms of visualizing certain aspects of the model. I mean, one good aspect we'll be looking into is to show some attributes and sort of color by attributes, but also sort of querying specific elements for attributes. So yeah, if you haven't signed up for the core SSO, you will have to do that first. Yeah, I think David also showed that earlier. But if you have a login, you can essentially just use that those credentials to log in. So what you will see when you log in is essentially your dashboard of different projects, right? And each project has a number of models. So the models are essentially a subset of projects. So the idea is that you can sort of split up your projects into multiple models, which you then can kind of manage on like separate essentially, and then kind of merge them and show and visualize different aspects of them. But I'm going to start with the volumes model. So just giving you guys a quick little walkthrough of how uploading Mirar model would actually look like. So here is essentially the model that Dave presented. So I'm going to build the Mirar components real quick here, just so you can sort of understand how it works. I mean, it's pretty simple. I mean, we're talking about maybe like 10 different components or something like that. But that will include the geometry, but also the attributes. So we can use that information to do various types of queries and stuff like that.
Yeah, and real quick, this is sample file 2. So if you wanted to follow along, you can open that one up.
Exactly. Yeah. So the first thing that I want to do is actually turn the BREPs into meshes. So we're going to see, you'll find all the Mirar tools under the Core Apps tab. So, and you're going to notice that there is there are actually 2 sub-tabs that we're looking into, and that's Spectacles Beta and Mirar Beta. And you can say that Spectacles is sort of the library that is powered by, Mirar is powered by Spectacles, you can say. The Spectacles library is essentially all the different components you need for building these visualization models. So there will be basically these 2 sub-tabs that I'm going to be using. So for building the mesh, you will locate the create mesh component first of all. And that takes a number of different inputs, obviously a mesh. So notice here that my floor volumes, that's represented by BREPs here, but you can easily just plug it in here. It will, obviously convert it into a mesh on the fly. So now I have the mesh as expressed as a spectacles mesh. And then I want to go ahead and actually attach the attributes. Just to clarify, I mean, all these, if I just bake it and we can just take a look at one of these units, it's essentially just, a closed BREP representing one floor. And then we have various types of metadata attached to those floors. So to create the attribute, you will use the create attributes component. And it will take, it's essentially just a key value pair, right? So you have a name and then you have values. So, and it's important to match those because here you have, let's see, it's 8 different keys, obviously, right? and then you have a data tree here with 8 different values. So they will be matched in the typical sort of Grasshopper fashion, because this is a list, and here you have what is it, 58 lists, right? So I'll just plug these ones in. That will give me 58 attributes, which will have to match with the the meshes that I put in here in the mesh input. I'll also actually flatten these outputs to not create well, yeah, it's 8 times the attributes that I actually need. But so you can just plug it in, and now I should actually have my mesh elements decorated with the attributes.
Emil, can you plug the output of the merge component node panel real quick, just to show how those data points, once they're grafted,
yeah, sure,
line up with the categories? Because this is, I think, one of the most confusing steps in this process. So if anyone has any questions about this, yeah, if you just want to plug that into a panel, because it'll show the attributes. Thanks.
Like this, absolutely. No, for sure. I mean, it's a little funky, but you want to be able to sort of dynamically assign attributes with or like construct these attributes. So one approach could have been to do something similar with the C# component, where you actually like name the this is the facade area or something like that, and you would plug in the actual value for it. But doing this, it allows it to actually do things more sort of dynamically. But yeah, it's important to match the data structures for them. I guess you can also use the param viewer, but as long as you have matching number of keys here with the values, you'll be just fine. Cool. All right, so when I have my mesh here, I am going to go ahead and create a model. Actually, I'll show you that. So yeah, just to kind of yeah, go over that again. Basically, a model is a subset of a project, and in the model, you can have multiple elements, essentially. So and a model can also have attributes, in fact. We're not going to use that today, but you can also set the views, which we'll go over in the web viewer shortly. So that's pretty much it in terms of actually just building the model. Now, obviously, like when I want to upload this, I will have to tell the Grasshopper Mirar plugin that I want to upload it to my account, and obviously which project it should go to. So I'm actually going to head back over to the web interface, if I can do that. And I'll go back to the dashboard, and I'm going to actually create a new project. So let's just call it, demo volumes. And I'm lazy, so I'm going to copy that name. And so first of all, I have to log in, right, to my account. And you do that using the core SSO component. I was already logged in, so it actually just loads my my credentials and kind of log me in automatically. But if you do this for the first time, you will have to double click on it and launch the login form, which allows you to input your credentials essentially. So if this is successful, you would see your login and your name as an output here. And you can actually use this object to fetch your projects, which we will do now. So you can find the get projects component under the Mirar beta sub tab.
Real quick before this, are there any questions at this point from anyone or anything you want to go over again?
Yeah, for some reason, when I double click it, it doesn't pop up my login. And then Mirar, when I get on Mirar, there's no projects.
Okay. Got it. Can you right click and do this show login form?
I did that too. Same, it's just nothing.
Okay.
One question is, so in your libraries folder where the Grasshopper plugin is the executable? Emil, can you go to that real quick under File, Special Folders?
Yes. Yeah, sure. Oh yeah, I can actually open it up from here, right?
Yeah. And components, yeah. So probably in core.
Yeah, in the core Mirar,
Yeah.
there's the uploader exe.
Yes.
Okay, so that's in there. Right click on that and just make sure it's unblocked.
Pretty sure I'd done that in the, it doesn't show anything.
The zip file?
Yeah, when I ran the zip file the first time, obviously, yeah, and then I opened the PDF and then I saw, got to unblock it.
Can you try restart Rhino? It could be that the Grasshopper click events sometimes, get stuck, or yeah, I've experienced that before. And yeah, that might be something to try.
Okay, well, I don't want to hold it up, so.
That's right.
Yeah, let me know in chat if you want to go into a breakout room and try to work through that.
Incompatible program fixed. Okay.
Anyway, so I mean, I have my project that I created here, right? And I gave it a name. And as you can see here, I don't actually have any models, so there's nothing to visualize at this point. But going back here, I can essentially just paste this name into a panel, feed it into the name input here. Actually, before I do that, I can just show you guys that it will fetch basically all my projects from the server. And this name input will just allow me to kind of filter, essentially. And doing that, you can see that I actually found my projects. And so now when I have this, I should be able to just upload it, right? There is one more thing that I wanted to do. I want to give the mesh a name. Let's call it like floor volumes. So I'll show this shortly in the web viewer as well, but it's a pretty neat, neat feature for just organizing information because you can easily kind of hide and show layers. So let's do the, I think it's called the uploader, right? Like model upload, here you go. And it will ask me for a project, which I'll fit in here. Then you can have a model name, and I'll actually just use the same name as I had before. And description, that's fine, you can leave that as is. The spectacles model is the one that we created here, and then an upload button. So I always create a button and not a toggle, because if you leave it true, it will actually upload a new model every time you compute the solution. So it's better to use the button, and that's pretty much it. So I'll just actually go ahead and press it, and now you will see the loader launching, and yeah, it's just grabbing the Grasshopper model and the spectacles model that we just created, and pushing it up to the cloud. And then it redirects me to the viewer, essentially. So in here, we can do a bunch of different things, but just to kind of start out, the sort of big, I guess, thing here in the middle is obviously the 3D view of the model, right? Another nifty feature that we kind of dig a lot is the ability to select elements, essentially. So this is also the reason for why we didn't want to join the whole mesh into one big mesh, because then you wouldn't actually be able to select these individually. And the good thing is, obviously, once you select them, you will actually see the element properties of the current selection with all its attributes essentially coming from this portion of the Grasshopper definition. And then once you have this, I mean, that can be good for just sort of querying individual elements. But if you wanted to get an overview, there is a feature called color by attributes. So you can actually launch that feature or turn on that feature in two different ways. Either you use it from here, that I will talk more about shortly, or you can actually just click on it. So if we, for instance, click on the floor program, it will actually start coloring the different volumes or meshes by their floor program, right? And so if you now open up the options here, you will have the ability to, in a sort of drop down actually, also alter and visualize the different attributes in the model. So yeah, so perimeter length, I think Dave talked about most of this, but it can be a pretty nice way of just sort of showing, an overview of the model really. And obviously you have the gradients and what it actually means here on the side. So this becomes especially, I mean, a pretty common use case for TT is that you have some, analysis model, maybe in SAP or, ETABS or something like that, and you want to, make visualizations of the analysis results. Then you can actually use these attributes to just decorate the elements, push it up to Mirar, and see the whole, the model with attributes in the browser, and then obviously sort of querying and get an overview of the structural behavior. But another common workflow is to just from your Revit model, as you know, like the visualization features in Revit is not always completely transparent and easy to work with, especially if you're in a project with people that might not be fully up to speed with the corners of Revit, so to speak. Then this can be a pretty neat way of just communicating your models. Anything you want to add, Dave?
I would love to change those hideous colors. How do we do that, Emil?
Let's do that. Okay, so right. I mean, it comes with some kind of pre-baked gradients here. I don't know. Do you have a favorite? I think this one is pretty
Metro.
neat. But,
yeah, the second one's always my go-to.
Yeah, nice. It's a good one as well. So what else we got? Obviously, the clipping is an interesting feature, especially if you have, tower or some other model where you have a lot of information kind of being stuck within enclosed kind of spaces. So, and that comes in two different forms. You can either do it with a plane, and then just sort of move the clipping plane along an axis. But you can also use the box clipping feature, which can be pretty nifty if you want to, for instance, just cut it off and visualize just a portion of the model. And this works as a range, right? Yeah.
Yes. Real quick, you've got one of the Zoom meeting panels kind of overtops some of the properties. Could you pull that down a little bit?
Oh, like that?
Yeah, that thing's hiding a lot of stuff.
Oh, really? Okay, sorry, I didn't realize you saw that because I have some other Ring Central user interface components all over my screen. But okay, that's good.
That's good.
Thanks. Okay, cool. And yeah, this box clipping feature obviously works in different dimensions as well, so it can be pretty useful in some contexts. So that's just for kind of basic visualizations. I actually wanted to go back and show you guys how you can embed multiple models within one project. So let's go back to Grasshopper, and I'll open up Dave's definition here that basically includes sort of all the different components. I mean, before we just actually worked with the floors as volume models or floor volumes, but this one here actually embeds pretty much every aspect. So let's see here.
Yeah, I think one important thing to note on this one is it's basically just repeating that same process that we did in the first one, which is matching attributes to some mesh geometry.
Yeah.
And even though we're going to upload multiple instances to the same project, as you can kind of see in the definition, we're sharing that project throughout. but the rest of it's just kind of copy and paste and swap it out for the different attributes. So it's pretty easy to build up a more complicated file.
Exactly. No, that's exactly right. I mean, it's just, it's the same process, but now we're actually sharing the same same project here. I'm actually going to create a new project for this one as well. So let's just go back to the dashboard and click the little plus button here, and let's call this demo_full. So no surprises here. We don't have any models, but if we simply copy and paste that name into the panel in Grasshopper, we should be able to actually select this project. Yeah, and as Dave said, I mean, this portion is the one that I just uploaded to another model with the floor volumes. But then we also have, let's see here, this is the floor slabs, right? I mean, essentially just extruded slabs representing each floor. And then finally, we also have the panels, and they look like this. So if I bake one here, you can see that we actually have small little mesh quads representing the panels. And then obviously we have some attributes attached to that as well. So what's cool is that you can have different sorts of portions of your model with different types of attributes, all assigned to sort of different models, but then they can actually share the same project. So let's just go ahead and upload every one of these. So each Mirar upload component has a button. So I don't actually know what happens if you're trying to upload all of them at the same time, Dave, but I wouldn't recommend that.
No, it does work. Like, you can upload multiple models, but the issue is if you run into a problem, it's really tricky to figure out which model it came from that caused the issue. So typically, even though it's more things to click, I'll do this method. If you have the same button for all of them, it'll just launch them 1, 2, 3 after the other.
Okay, got it. That makes sense. Cool. All right, I'll just start with the floor model. So the heaviest one of these 3 models should be the facade one, right? I mean, it's especially when it comes to visualizing stuff in the browser, things like a lot of small meshes is usually heavier to visualize than one big thing, so to speak. And in the case of the panels, obviously we have a lot more individual elements compared to the floors or the floor volumes that we uploaded before. So let's just proceed. And as you can see, it sort of pops open my browser when it's done. But we can simply ignore that and just kind of continue. So we're gonna do the overview just when everything is uploaded. Something that we put a little bit of emphasis on is to actually make the upload process sort of transparent, right? I mean, it's easy. It's easy to just do a massive push to the cloud, right, and then just kind of upload everything. But there is a pretty good chance that you will wait and not knowing exactly what's going on. So we have kind of made an effort to upload models in chunks as opposed to a huge piece here. So something is up here. Let's see what it says. Cannot perform runtime binding on null reference. Okay.
Okay. So this is a fun quirk everyone will probably run into at one point. Let's call it a feature, not a bug. It's certainly a bug, which is every now and then you just have to log out of your user and log back in.
Got it. Let's do that.
Mine doesn't pop up when you right click and show login form. Is that a thing? Is that a issue?
You also experience that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Mark, how did you resolve that issue? Because that. Oh, you muted. Sorry.
I haven't yet.
Okay.
I
That's
just
a new
keep
one.
trying to go through everything, and
Okay,
I went through the
that's
install twice now, so I was about to switch to a different machine.
I do wonder if it's the application isn't allowed to run potentially on a machine.
Oh yeah, right. I wonder if this is it trying to, you know, write the token to the disk or something like that, and the disk doesn't have permission to be written on or something.
Yeah.
I've seen that issue before. Do you have admin privileges on your machine?
I should.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you need to run it once as an administrator to maybe?
Yeah, or can you see if you can run Rhino as an admin, if possible? That
Yeah,
could be worth trying.
The other thing to do is try just running the uploader.exe. Just double click on it and see if it actually goes there. The other one is in all the DLLs that got copied over is core library UI in the same folder.
Right.
Oh, I bet I know what it is.
Yeah.
Okay. Did you install Swarm yet?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Try this. In your libraries folder, Emil, if you can go there again.
Yes.
I bet I know what it is.
At least I'm not the only one.
You're not.
If you can go to, yeah, so there is a DLL in there called Core Library UI. You'll probably see, there it is. Delete that from your libraries folder. So what's happening is that's associated with the user object, but what's happening is Grasshopper is probably loading this one instead of the one in Swarm first. So I have a feeling if you delete it here and then unfortunately restart Rhino and Grasshopper, it will probably work.
Oh yeah, I had a conflict when I opened it. It asked me if I wanted the 2020 version or the 2017 version. I got rid of the 2017 version.
Interesting. Okay.
That's interesting.
Same.
So
Okay.
maybe I got rid of the wrong one.
Could be.
So now am I gonna have to? I don't know. Am I gonna have to reload Swarm or?
Maybe. The
If
other
it doesn't have any DLL, then it definitely won't work.
Yeah.
Okay.
So the other way to do this would be if you deleted that is to copy. Well, we're getting into tech fun now. If you go to the Swarm folder, Emil, I don't know if you can navigate to that. That's a little bit deeper in the hard drive. You can copy the user one from there. So that is under
program data, right?
Yes.
Oops. And Thornton Tomasetti, I believe, and then core Rhino, and then it should be 6. And here you should see a folder called Swarm.
Maybe.
Yep. Okay.
And if
Oh,
you
there's
open
the DLL. Yeah.
Yeah, let me.
I think you're right. It's probably a conflict of the core library UI. And yeah, exactly, like different versions, and then one version is loaded before the other one.
Yeah, so in that folder, there is there's probably that core UI.
Yeah.
And so it's looking for that one. So I think if you,
I mean, another one, you could probably try to not load Swarm before you load Grasshopper. I mean, if you open up Rhino without loading Swarm and then just go straight to Grasshopper, I suppose it wouldn't load any of those DLLs that are in this folder.
Yeah, there's one other thing you can do. Let me try this. So if you go to your app data roaming, Emil, you might know better than me where this is, but the Grasshopper Swarm library.
Well, Swarm Rhino that's installed in the program data folder.
Yes, but Swarm Grasshopper has a repeat of the GH user or core SSO GHA library.
Yeah.
I bet if you just move that library to Mirar,
Okay.
that would solve it.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, that could work.
I just have to remember where that is.
I mean, there is a Swarm folder, but I don't think it's loaded from this folder.
No, somewhere else.
That's I mean, if it's a Grasshopper plugin or related to any of the dependencies of the Grasshopper plugin, that would be in the libraries folder under app data. Or actually, yeah, you could check out this one as well. The roaming Grasshopper 6, actually. I think that's where Swarm Grasshopper will be installed.
Okay. So I just posted the link to my location on chat. If you just replace your username there, inside of that folder is a GHA called core.grasshopper.coreapps. You can just copy that or move that, sorry, not copy, move that over to the Mirar folder, and then that should solve the problem.
Move or copy?
Move, because we don't want to duplicate. So Emil, maybe I can share my screen real quick.
Sure, yeah.
Just then we can jump back. Sorry about this, everyone. Okay, so in my case, it would just be moving the core Grasshopper from the.
Are you sharing your screen, Dave?
I should be, but I wasn't. Let me do that real quick. Okay. So here, basically, if under your Grasshopper 6 library swarm, you can just grab this core Grasshopper core apps GHA and just drag that over to, in your case, it's probably the Mirar folder, but the folder where the Mirar uploader and everything is. And then just make sure that core library UI is in that same folder. So it'd just be doing this. And then you just want to make sure to then delete core library UI inside of Swarm, which will probably cause problems later, but we'll solve them for right now.
Should we take the core library UI out of the program data as well, or?
I think you're okay to leave it in there.
Okay.
I think it's just here. That's the issue. And then you just have to restart Rhino and Grasshopper. Sorry, Bill. You can go ahead and share your screen again. So if it's all right with everyone, I think we'll keep going with that kind of Mirar demo and then follow up with some of these issues in chat if something pops up.
Sounds good. All right. Yeah, I'm almost done here. I just wanted to show a few more things related to multiple models in one project. So yeah, as you saw, I uploaded all these individual models to the same project from Grasshopper. We can see that they actually ended up here in my sample project. And now if I wanted to combine them, I'll just open up one of them. Let's do the floor volumes, which will pull the data and visualize this. So now I'm actually just looking at one model, but there is a pretty neat feature that you can access from under the viewer settings that says overlay models. So if you actually wanted to include multiple models in the same scene, then you would use this option. So I'll do that, save. And if I now go back and press the plus sign here, it will actually start importing you know, the other model essentially. And if I do the same process again, it's going to include a third one. So by doing that, I actually have all these 3 different models. Yeah, what is the benefit with this? I mean, I guess I see 2 kind of immediate ones that I think is pretty interesting. I mean, first of all, it's obviously nice to sort of you know, maintain models separately, right? I mean, you can imagine that you have 3 different you know, team members that work on different things, and then you can actually sort of split it up into separate models. But then you can also, while you have it structured in this way, quite easily sort of toggle on and off in terms of different you know, visualization options. And that also works with the layers. So you have sort of two sort of levels of you know, visualization options, both on the level of the model, but then also layers you know, under the model, so to speak. And that also works with sort of transparency settings, right? So if you wanted to like have sort of a hint of the facade panels, but still, you know, show the slabs, you can sort of do that by using that feature. The features of sort of the select and show attributes should kind of work with the same you know, same sort of approach that we used earlier. Yeah, there's some other good stuff that I actually didn't want to forget to show as well. If you wanted to share this now, so something that we've experienced is that, okay, let's say that I have this amazing model now, all uploaded to Mirar, and I wanted to share a snapshot with someone. It's you know, a little bit of a bummer having to, let's say that I'm sharing a particular view of the model with someone and then force them to actually sign up to Mirar. I mean, that's obviously good for us getting more users and so on, but it's obviously a bit of a you know, bump in the road, so to speak. So you can in fact find a particular view that you want to you know, take a closer look at, and now if you hit the share this view, that will allow you to basically share this specific camera angle of the model. You know, just bear in mind that doing that will make the model public, right? I think you can share, Dave, correct me if I'm wrong. I mean, I can invite multiple private users to the same projects, and
Yeah,
then
if you want,
share it privately.
I can share my screen and show some of those things.
Yeah, sure.
Great. So let me just load this up. So here I have the public view of the same model. So as Emil was saying, there's a couple different ways you can share. So one is you can publicly share a specific view as we've been showing. The other is if you go to the project settings. Let me make sure I'm sharing the correct screen. Can everyone see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. I don't have the usual green frame around it telling me. If I go to the project settings here, I can go down to this section under settings, and under the team, I can go ahead and hit this plus sign, and then I can add I'm not going to type all that out. We really need to shorten this. And I can change the permission levels. that they have. So after I hit add, Emil has been added to this project. Now I can choose to make an editor and an admin. The only difference is the admin can delete. And then when I hit save, it's going to send an actual email invite to Emil, letting him know that the project has been shared with him. I can also control whether a project is public or private by going into edit mode here, and I can toggle this back and forth. So if I made a project public so that I could share it with some people for a meeting, if I want to switch it back to private afterwards so that they can't share it with someone else, I can toggle it here and that will change the permissions. In the settings is also where I can add a description if I want to, or change the name of the project. The other thing I can do is I can go in and I can upload a project image. So in our kind of preview here, we see a little bit better if we go to the tiles mode, basically an image that gets automatically generated by Mirar for each project when we create our first view. But if I want to add an image in there, again, I can just go here to the settings and I can upload the project image there if I want, store other files. The other things I can do is once I've created that view, like it's just showing, let me go back here and edit it. The first time I go and click here to click share this view, it'll give me that warning if the project isn't already public, and I can click that button there and make it public. Once I've created this view though, I can also go back into my project settings, and on the views tab here, I can see all the views that I've created. These two just happen to be identical with one another. And I can do a few things here. I can edit the name and change the description if I don't like the default one. I can delete it, like this one I don't actually want to keep, so I'm going to get rid of it. And apparently we have to reload. And then there's two other really nice things I can do. One, I can just copy the link. So for example, the links that have been put into the Google slide deck are basically just copied right from here. The other thing I can do is I can click save a QR code, and I can download that image. Now, the nice thing about that is someone had asked earlier in the chat if it works on multiple platforms, is Mirar is mobile friendly. So if I were to just scan this QR code on my phone or my tablet or whatever, I'll go directly to the Mirar model and I can begin to pan around it in 3D on the actual device itself. One of the other things we could do is in the views, if we're not doing a color by mode, which views will save the color by status, and they'll save, if I clear this, basically the exact view configuration that I had here. If I don't want basically this kind of default grayish blue color, back in Rhino, in the Mirar uploader, there's an input here we didn't talk about for materials because it's kind of getting into the weeds. But like, let's say we wanted to give it a little bit of a glass look and we wanted to make our concrete look a little more white or something like that. Under the Core Apps tab, if I can find it, in Spectacles, there's also some options for materials. You can make a Lambert material or a Fong. These are just the default 3JS materials, basically. So you can customize the way that looks, and then you just plug that in as part of the attributes into your mesh geometry. So when you're setting up that view that you want to share with someone, you can go in and control that. Under the viewer settings, you can also pick and choose what people have access to. So if you don't want them to have the ability to change models or see properties or do clipping, you can turn all these off. And these won't affect your workspace. Like if I uncheck clipping, I'll be like, why does it still show up for me? Well, that's for a shared view. So you can control just how much someone can actually do with your model. And the last thing you can get into is customizing some of the visualizations. So, sorry, Emil, I kind of ran away with it. Do you want to talk about?
No, go for it. Go for it. Go for it.
Okay. You can go in and control a few things. So when Grasshopper uploads, it uploads to generic model units. It, just like Grasshopper with Rhino, it doesn't know what the units are. It just uploads them, assumes they're meters by default. Well, there is an option to measure on a model. This maybe isn't the right type of model to do that on. But you can choose the unit types that's going to be in. Additionally, if I'm creating a presentation and I'm kind of doing everything in a darker color, I can go in and I can actually change the background color. I can also create a ground plane then and add a little bit of fog to kind of soften the edge there. And so I can kind of create a little bit nicer potential viewing environment. I can also change the ground plane color, maybe if I wanted to make that solid black. I can also adjust the lighting a little bit. 3JS is always a little bit dark, so I can either increase or decrease the ambient lighting on the scene, which we'll have to be careful of blowing out the colors. And I can also choose whether or not I want a hover tooltip. So when the mouse is over it, depending on what attribute is currently being selected, I can just kind of scrub over the model and see that attribute showing up there. Also under the settings, if for some reason I just really don't like yellow as a selection color, I can change that because why not? That's basically kind of the main things you can change inside of Mirar. Other than that, everything else is just kind of in the settings section that we looked at, which is really just about deleting projects, sharing projects, etc. Are there any questions about the Mirar interface or any thoughts?
Is there any, like, I guess when you're working through, is there any consideration for performance that you need to take into account, like a maximum number of geometries, or like what's kind of best practices for being able to actually navigate these models?
Yes, so there is a maximum number of elements on here. I can't remember, it's somewhere in the hundreds of thousands. It's fairly large.
Yeah.
The biggest thing I usually do is if I'm going to use this model for a presentation is I try it on my phone first. And if it's taking more than like 2 minutes to load the model up on the phone, that probably means I'm at risk when I'm doing something like a Zoom call, eating up bandwidth and trying to load the model at the same time. Now it does a little optimization and loading in the background. So if I started zoomed in, it will kind of load in some of the geometry depending on the model size. But once it's loaded into memory, the only real consideration is one, how long is it going to take to get there? And then two, how much is it going to impact Chrome's performance? Because if you have, a million pieces of geometry in here, it's just going to run slow.
That's usually the challenge, actually, having a lot of geometry elements that you're not like, load same scene. So in that sense, like the model, like multiple model in one project structure can be pretty nice because you can quite easily just turn off and turn on different portions of the model.
Yeah, and one of the things I come to think of it we didn't mention is in the overlay models, if I go in, if I click the right thing, and let's say I add, whoops, this one doesn't have any additional ones. Let me go to the tower one here. If I have the floor slabs in here, I never put any attributes on the floor slabs. So I don't actually want to be able to select them, but I do just want them in the background. Another example of this is like if you're doing master planning and you have a context model around it, there's nothing on there, but you might want it in the scene. There is an option under your model settings for, let's say, floor slabs. If I click on edit here, I can choose to make this an underlay model.
Oh, cool.
And what that means is even when I filter and thread, as we're going to see in a minute, or I'm doing anything else in Mirar, it kind of grays it out here to let you know. We tend to go for the cheapest, fastest way to show some of that stuff. It works. Now we'll see once this kind of reloads here. It might take a second. What we'll see is that the slabs actually won't be selectable or won't get colored by with attributes. They'll kind of be frozen. The number of data points is the other thing to consider, and that doesn't have anything to do with the performance, meaning, let me go ahead and hide something here. It's not going to impact, I guess another thing we didn't mention is in addition to the transparency, you can also just turn a layer off as well. So if I want to make facade panels semi-transparent, here we go. And now we'll see my floor slabs, right? I can't click on them anymore. But the other thing is like when I'm clicking on an object, I'm seeing the number of attributes here. You can have hundreds or thousands of attributes. There really won't be that much of a performance impact. What you have to consider is basically how big your screen is and how much scrolling you want to do. So if you use the Revit exporter, there's kind of a big filtration option you can do on what to upload. That is something to consider because the Revit exporter will just export everything from Revit in terms of the attributes, which can be a lot of useless information. So those are kind of the main considerations with the model uploading.
Awesome, thanks.
Yeah. Okay, so that's mostly it for Mirar. The one important thing to note is when you do share the view and copy it, if I go to an incognito window, because I've made that public, anyone can see it. Now, as we all know, you're not going to easily be able to search for that on Google and find it. So it's not like the whole world has quick and easy access, to your model, but it does mean it's out there in public. And if you do have proprietary information on here for some reason, like a client name or, tenant name or something like that, it is just something to keep in mind that anyone who has that link can access it during the time period it's public. But you can always switch it back to private, and then everyone with that link loses access to it at that time. So as I mentioned before, we'll kind of use it little bursts for a meeting. We'll make it public, and then afterwards lock it down again if it requires. Are there any questions about Mirar? I actually think we've covered just about everything on the viewer, including finding some fun new bugs with the Grasshopper.
No, for sure. And I mean, I think we mentioned that before, but I mean, we just showed you how to get a Grasshopper model up to Mirar now, but then, you know, we obviously have other exporters, Mirar exporters for other platforms as well, including Revit.
So I figured something out. If when I went back into my Mirar, I logged out, logged back in, and under my login, it says download plugins. If I download that plugin with a 2019 date on it, it has all of the things that we just tried to copy over into that folder.
Yep.
And now I can double click, I can log in.
Oh, really?
Okay,
Okay,
great.
That's good to know. Okay.
And now I'm willing to bet when we go to Swarm won't work. So we'll cross that bridge when we get there.
Exactly.
That's good to know. Okay, yeah. So just to show that for everyone, then when you go to the download section, I think as I mentioned before, you can download the plugins for Revit and Grasshopper here as well. Thanks, Mark. That's good to know.
Yep.
I just kept trying.
Okay, so what I want to look at now is one of the questions that came up in chat was, can you kind of search or query the model? And inside of Mirar currently, you can't. Basically, your ability to kind of navigate is based on clicking on attributes and filtering them, using tooltips to kind of capture the information, or toggling between the different options by going down to your attributes here and selecting it. But if I want to kind of do more advanced filtering or kind of understand more about what's going on with this model, I'm actually going to need to take the information from Mirar and I'm going to want to move it over to Thread, which is the next platform we'll talk about. Now, Thread does have some Grasshopper components that are available for it, but I'm going to go ahead and put the link to a specific view in the chat and also in the Slack for the group. This is the same Mirar link that's in the presentation if you have it open. If you open that model or use one you've uploaded, you'll see this little option down here to download data as a CSV. Now, you may not see that if you're just looking at the view and you don't own the project. So I'm going to go ahead and put this data that I'm going to download in a second in the chat and Slack as well. But when I click this button, what I'm actually going to get is I'm going to get a CSV or an Excel file containing all the attributes from this model. So let me drop that into Slack.
Before we jump into Thread, should we take just 5 minutes, a little break or something? Thinking we're halfway through.
Yeah, sure. So what we're going to look at now is basically how do we begin to move that information from our Mirar model over to a Thread dashboard. So before we do that, I'm just going to show a little bit about what Thread actually is. So as I mentioned before, Thread is the data visualization and model visualization platform for AEC. And what it basically is it allows you to associate model and data together and build up a presentation dashboard that allows you to add in things like more advanced filtering and all kinds of data visualizations on top of your Mirar model or just from a generic CSV as well, so any data. We're going to be using Mirar because there's a nice feature where you can live link the 3D model to the actual dashboard that you're creating. So you can essentially create a dashboard for your project where as you go in and filter different elements here, you're interacting live with that 3D model and manipulating it. In addition to that, let's see if I have something here. Yep, you can also create data visualizations where you can look at things like takeoffs or percentages of areas and all types of different information. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to pull the data from our Mirar model, and that's the data that I just shared. We'll go through that again. We'll look at how to load that into Thread and talk about how to use Thread a little bit. And the important thing to keep in mind is even though we're going to use model information, any CSV of data will do. So even if you download an EPW weather file and you take out the header and just get the tabulated information, you can visualize that. You can also create a CSV, or an Excel file from Grasshopper or any source. And so long as it's well formulated, meaning you don't have random text in there, it's just a very clean table of data, you can upload it to Thread. So from Mirar, the way this works is if you're the owner of the model, I don't believe it works with just shared views, but you'll have this option here to download as a CSV. And when you download as a CSV, what you're going to get is you're going to get basically this Excel file. And this Excel file is just going to contain the information for every model element here. So for example, in the one that I just created, we actually have a lot of excessive data we don't need. So let's not use this file potentially. I'm going to send another CSV instead of using this because I don't like the data on this one. So let's use the one, sorry about this, that I actually sent from the chat, which is the one from the sample file. So the one in the meeting chat is fine. And let me just remove that. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and download this and then open this file. Okay, so this is a much cleaner data set. All right, so in this data set, what we're going to see is we're going to see that we basically have the universal ID. So this is the ID of each one of the model elements. And then we'll see here that we have all of our model data that we get uploaded to the project, basically as a table. So here's our perimeter lengths, floor areas, etc. So even if we're not going to use this for thread, we can still just pull down all the data from, let's say, a Revit file, for example, by uploading it to Mirar and then downloading the tabulated data. So this is kind of a nice handy way to maybe pull that data over into Grasshopper or something else you want to use. With that data in place, though, as a CSV file, what I can do is inside of thread is I'm going to go in and create a new project. And I'm going to do this the same way I did inside of Mirar, where I just hit the big green plus sign and then hit Save Changes. Okay, so now I'm going to have a new project available in Thread. And if I click on that project, what the project is the project can basically be thought of as a workbook in Excel. It's a collection of individual data sets or sheets, if you want another Excel analogy. So if I click on the plus here for the data sets, I'll call this one Mirar. Upload. I'm going to create a new data set collection. And I can click the upload button in my Mirar data set collection. And this will bring me to a little uploader where I can drag and drop or browse to pull in that CSV. So again, in this case, I'm going to use the CSV that I shared in the chat, which is associated with that particular Revit view. And again, this is also the one called volumes, or floors, sorry, in the sample file. So that's the Mirar AEC Tech 2020 floors CSV and part of the samples. Okay, so I'm going to click Browse in this case. And under my downloads, I'm just going to grab that Mirar AEC Tech and click on it. Now, the first thing Thread is going to do is it's going to go in and it's going to show me each one of the fields or columns. So this is equivalent to if we go and open that CSV one more time. It's a nice delay from Windows. Each one of these items that we're seeing listed here, the columns, is equivalent to one of the titles of the column inside of my CSV. So if I see those and go over here, I can see each one of those titles. And it's also doing its best to guess what type of data it is. So if it thinks the entire column is numbers, it will go in here and say number. If it thinks it's text, it will go in and say string. And then we also support tags, dates, and time, and then also file and image paths as well. And you can change those things if you think it's a tag or a date instead here by clicking the drop down and changing the data type if you're sure it's one type or the other. When I hit save, it's going to go ahead and upload that data, and it's going to tell me 58 total entries. And if I want to verify that my data has uploaded correctly, I can click on where it says 58 total entries, and this will take me to the entries page here. And all this is just a table that's going to list out all of the values. And so I can just confirm that my floor programs are in the correct column, they're in the floor programs, heights are correct, etc. So now that I know all of my data is correct, I can go ahead and move to a dashboard. However, if I see that there's an error here, I can always click edit and I can actually modify that data and go in and change it. And I'm going to have restrictions here, like it knows this is supposed to be a number, so it's only going to let me put numbers in here. For text, I can type anything. And then if I have files associated with the model as well, I can add in those file names using the editor. So the editor kind of helps keep the parameters safe in the way you wanted them to be formatted. But since all my data is clean and everything looks good, I can go ahead and click on the little drop down up here under the dataset name, and I can go to create a dashboard. And when I do this, I'm going to start off in the dashboard editor page. So if you've ever used, again, Tableau, Google Data Suite, Microsoft Power BI, any of those kind of apps that are kind of a data visualization widget based, Thread is very similar to that in terms of the way it's formatted. So what you do in the editor is basically you go in and select from a series of widgets in this kind of scroll panel on the left, and then you drag them over to the right. So for example, the first thing we might want to do is maybe we just want to create one layout, which is just going to be our data table. So that way we can go in and just look at the raw data if we want to. So I'm going to click and drag a data table from the widget panel over here to the actual layout manager. And then I can resize it and move it around as I want for this particular layout type. And so in this case, maybe all I'm interested in is just seeing my data, and that's all I'm going to do for my first dashboard. I might want to filter the data that I see. For example, I'm not going to be able to tell what a UUID is for anything. It's not human readable. So I can click on the widget settings, which is always in the upper right-hand corner here. And I can click and choose which data I want to visualize. So I'm going to turn off the UUID. I know the layer is always going to be the same, so I might turn that off. And I can also click and drag and reshuffle the order of things here as well if I want to. And that's going to be reflected inside of the chart. So I might want to start with, let's say, floor height first, followed by program. Okay, I'll hit close. And then at this point, this might be my first dashboard that I want to create for my data visualization. So I'm going to hit Save Changes, and I'll just call this one Data Table Layout. And I'll click Save. So now I'm in the actual visualization for the dashboard. So I can minimize the sidebar if I want to kind of maximize the data table itself. I can also click on this little button here to go full screen if I just wanted to look at the data in a presentation format. And now I can go and scroll through the data set, and I can click on any one of the individual rows or entries and then see all the data that's associated with that. And I also have some options here to go in and rate something or tag it. So let's say that I happen to find a panel that has something really wrong with it. I could always click and make a little note there, and then that'll be accessible to anyone who has this dashboard in place. But that's not very exciting. So what I'd like to do is I'd like to actually build up a dashboard where I'm going to be able to filter and get some top-level analytics out of my Mirar model while seeing the Mirar model itself. So to do that, I'm going to open up my properties panel again, and I'm going to click edit on the data table layout. And this time I'm going to save, and I'm just going to save this as a new layout that I'm going to call the Mirar viewer. Okay, and I'm just doing this first and checking the option to save the new layout, so that way I don't accidentally overwrite my previous layout. So I'll hit save. And now I'm going to edit this new view, and I'll go ahead and delete that data table. So now what I want to do is I first want to get my Mirar model to come into my project. So to do that, I'm going to scroll down on my widgets to the Mirar viewer, and I'm going to click and drag the Mirar viewer and add it to the page here. So again, that's a little Mirar viewer widget. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on the Mirar viewer settings to bring up this little properties panel, and I'll see down here I have a little section to paste in a Mirar view. Now this is the Mirar view that I'm going to put in chat real quick, but it's the same view. Actually, yeah, I already pasted it in chat. Come to think of it, let's do it again. This is the same Mirar view that's in these sample files. If I paste that Mirar view into the viewer, it's going to shrink it down to just the edit name. And I'll go ahead and hit close. And now we'll see in the background here that the Mirar view has loaded into the scene itself. So again, that was just going into the settings panel and then just pasting in the Mirar view here. And that's just that hyperlink. Are there any questions about that? Okay. So this Mirar view is the same view where I downloaded the data from earlier on. So that means that the data corresponds directly to the model elements. And that's actually where that little UUID in the data set shows up. This is telling Thread now which one of the model elements is associated with each one of these data collections. So now what I want to do is maybe I want to set up a basic kind of dashboard for my project. So let's do a few things. The first thing I want to do is I want to help people understand what's going on in this dashboard. So I'm going to scroll up and grab a custom content widget and drag it onto the screen. And this is just a basic little markdown editor. Again, that's a custom content right here, where I can click on edit content and then go in and just using markdown. So let's increase number of headers, and I'll call this Mirar project. Hello world. There we go, apply. So I could go in here and write out a little project description, put some hyperlinks in here, maybe drop in an image, kind of decorate the dashboard a little bit to help people have some context when they open it to understand what's going on. Below that though, I'm gonna start adding some widgets that are gonna let me control what information gets filtered and then visualize some of the data. So I'm gonna drop in a simple search box. So I'm gonna scroll down to the search box widget, drag it in, and then I'm gonna go ahead and stretch that to be full width. And then I'm not gonna need to change anything on there. Nope. The next thing I'm gonna grab is I'm gonna go and get a data tile cloud. Okay. And that data tile cloud, I'll drag on. I have to reshuffle a little bit here. And what this is it's basically a series of buttons that are gonna allow me to filter the data. Now, I don't wanna go in and click on individual facade areas, but if I click the little settings, I might wanna go in and filter by the program. So let's find our floor program here and click that. And now I'm gonna see that I have a series of little buttons that list out the different programs inside of the project itself. Now let's add one more, or actually two more little widgets here, and then we'll move on. So the next two widgets I want to grab is, let's say as I filter through the different program types, I'm interested in knowing the total area. So I'm going to go down and I'm going to grab a scorecard widget and drag that onto my dashboard. And for the scorecard settings, I'm going to click on that and I'm going to select the total floor area. And then I'm going to choose to sum that area. And I'm also going to change the title of this to floor area. I can also control the significant digits or change the sizing here as well. And the last thing I want to do is I want to know how many of my floors I'm going to be filtering. So I'm going to click on or drag on the status count widget down here. We'll go ahead and stretch that a little bit. And for this, I just have some options about what I want to show. So do I want to show the number of items that get selected or the number of items that get filtered? In this case, I want to see the number of items filtered. And I can also choose to represent this as a percentage. Here we can see it switched to 100%. Or I can show it as a total count. Okay, so right now I built up a dashboard with my Mirar viewer, some little custom text up here, which might shrink down a little bit. Search bar, a filtering kind of UI, and then some top level readouts with the scorecard and the status count. So I'm happy with that dashboard for right now. So I'm going to go ahead and hit save. And when I save, I now have a dashboard where I can go in and search by, let's say, amenity. And so I can filter out the different amenities. Maybe I want to search for office. Or potentially if I had loaded different potential tenants or some types of tags or qualifiers in here, I can go in and basically filter the model by searching for any particular key or value. I can also use my little cloud down here to filter between the different object types. So let's say that I just want to see my office floor plates. I could go in and just click on office. And then I want to mix in my amenity or my mechanical. And we'll see as I select or deselect those different options, I'm getting a running sum down here of the total floor area. So if I just uncheck everything but mechanical, I can say I have 6K. I guess in this case it's square meters, assuming that's what I built the model in. A floor area for mechanical. I could click on office, and then I can see how much area I have for office. So I could quickly go through and look at those data points for each one of my different configurations. I can also go in and change a few of the options. Like for here, maybe I want to select all, deselect all to be available. So if I click edit again, I can go in and modify the dashboard. And under my options for my data tile cloud, I'll just check the option here for sell all or none. And now I might need to expand that a little bit. There we go. If I save it, here we go. I now have an option to select all or select none to automatically toggle between those different selection settings. And now let's say the last thing I want to do is I kind of want to see a percentage breakdown of how the areas are distributed for this particular program. So I'll once more go back in and edit that dashboard. And I'm just going to add a donut chart in. So I'll click and drag a donut chart. Let's just shrink everything a little bit. Okay. And under that donut chart, I'm going to click on the settings and I'm going to group it by floor program. And then I can sum by count, or in this case, I want to sum by the floor area. So we won't see too much of a difference because the areas are pretty consistent for the floor here in this particular building configuration. But I could either sum it again if I clear none by the total number of floors, or I could sum by any other factor. You know, I could see which one has the most facade faces, etc. But for floor area, makes the most sense. I can also choose to go in and see which labels I have here, or I can choose to align the labels horizontally or vertically. We'll see a little bit of the change showing up there. I can also, if I was doing something numeric, change the number of significant digits, etc. But now I have at the bottom here, and I'll go ahead and rename this one actually. I have this little donut chart that's reflecting the total area distribution. But now what I want to do is I want to coordinate the colors between what I'm seeing in the model, what I'm seeing down here, and potentially in other UI elements as well. So just like in Mirar, we can color by the data values. So if I click on the color by down here, I can choose from any one of my columns or fields, depending on how you think about it. So I can choose floor program. And now we'll see I get those colors coordinated between the model itself and the actual donut chart down here. And as I hover over the different properties, it's automatically filtering the elements so that I can basically see where those are located in the model. And I'm also getting this little pop-up with a generalized summary telling me how many I have, 48, and then the sum of the floor areas there. But I also have that summary up here. So if I just wanted to look at the floor areas down here, we'll see that we're both filtering the chart simultaneously as well as the model and the total floor areas that are showing up here. So we can kind of create this interactive dashboard where we're getting a little bit of top-level data visualization. We're getting an interactive 3D model that we can still pan around. And we also have the ability to add a little custom content or search by, again, amenity or something like that to filter through. And if I want to introduce this into a report or something like that, I can go ahead and just click the screen capture button. And that will download a transparent PNG. There we go, of the results. And the only little thing that happens up, and there's nothing I can do about this right now, is that the little checkbox shows up here. And occasionally the Mirar viewer in the iframe doesn't show up. So that's something we're working on. That's one of a few little bug fixes that came about in the latest release. But generally you can kind of get that screen capture of the dashboard, and occasionally the iframe doesn't come through, unfortunately. Working on it, should work soon. Something
I noticed was if any of these changes didn't happen, if I I had two different layouts. So if I switch back to the other layout and back into this one, then all the things update. So if they don't update live, then you can just swap out back and it'll come back.
Yes, yeah. It should, but it doesn't. So that's it's a good workaround. Great. Another thing you can do though is you'll notice if you change between the different data type layouts, the color by attribute should be maintained. So here when we're coloring by the floor program using this particular color, that actually continues when swapping between layouts. However, if I were to refresh the page or navigate away from it, I'm going to lose that color by state. It's going to go back to the kind of default monochrome appearance for everything except for the Mirar viewer. So one way you can maintain the kind of color by states and all of this is if you go and color by again, and we'll color by floor program, and maybe I might change the color scheme because I don't like it to Metro, and maybe swap the color gradient around so I get something that I like, is I can create a report. And what a report is a report is basically a collection of states you can save of dashboards and data sets. So for example, if I wanted to have one dashboard here where I'm just looking at the full program, I can click on the report drop down up here and start a new report. And then I'm going to edit that report. And by the way, this is one interface that will probably change the next couple of months because it is a little bit clunky. But if I edit the report, I can go in and choose any one of these states and add it to the report. So I'll call this one filtering or filter all. Now, if I want to create a different state in the report, maybe I want to deselect the amenity and mechanical, and I just had wanted to focus in on the main programs of office and retail. I can save this filtered state as a new page. So we'll call this primary programs. And I've added a new page to that report, which I can see here and also here. I can also change out the dashboard that I want to use. So maybe I want to go to the data table layout and just call this one data table and save it. And then when I'm done generating that report, I can exit. If I happen to have multiple data sets uploaded, so potentially I had a data set for the facade and a data set for the floor plate, or maybe I had a couple different mixes of programs, I could change these around in the either the editor or in Excel and upload another data set. I can actually swap out data sets as well as changing layouts and save those all to one report. But when I have the report done, I can click and select that report. And if I go full screen, I can now cycle through those different pages of the reports. And so I can kind of create different curated kind of experiences looking at the data and the distribution. And sometimes, and again, this is, again, another fun bug, that's why it's still beta, is the filtering will stick when going backwards on some of these. So you kind of just have to refresh, unfortunately. However, that only kind of happens when two similar data sets are adjacent to one another. We're working on fixing that. So if I want to save that report, one of the great things I can do is if I go and make my project public, similar to Mirar. So I'm just going to quickly go through that in the project settings. And then I can go and look at my reports. I can go in and change the order. So I could click and drag and put that filter all at the end and maybe start with the data table. And if I click on this link, I can copy this really long address. And now that it's public, I can actually share this report with someone so that they can both look at the kind of data and also have some ability to filter and edit it. Now you'll see all the options to modify the data, to do any editing have gone away. If I go to the drop down here, all I can do is look at the reports that are made accessible. So someone can go in and they can actually explore the model and the data and the relationship between the two. See that persistence setting. But they can also go in and modify so that they can use the dashboard. Instead of just being something like a static PDF, it's still dynamic. So they can go in and begin to filter the different programs. They can change the kind of color palette around and kind of do all the general kind of experiential navigation of the dashboard that you've set up, but they don't have the ability to go in and modify the data, to download the data, anything like that. They instead can just kind of navigate and work through the data set itself, and then look at the dashboard.
I guess a good use case of that is, I mean, in terms of the like producing different subsets of the data to present in the report could be, I mean, as a design team, you might want to look at all different, you know, aspects of the data and not really filter out any particular set, so to speak. But when you want to present it to external clients or something like that, you may want to shrink down the number of options or selection sets or whatever. So it can be nice to, or like basically a nice way of sort of shrinking the data sets and the options to actually visualize. And now we're actually just showing one model with multiple elements that has attributes, right? Another way of using thread that is pretty common is to have multiple design options, essentially. Like every data set or like every data item represents one design option. And I mean, in combination, we're not going to show that today, but you can generate thread data sets from Grasshopper. And using another plugin that we've developed called Colibri, you can sort of iterate through you know, different sort of permutations of parameters, produce kind of different individual data items that get collected into this CSV that you can upload and then kind of explore different design options.
Yep. And to wrap up a little bit on thread here, because we're getting a little tight on time to get to Swarm. Just to preview, you know, some of the different dashboards you could lay out in the sample report. So you could have different ways of kind of analyzing or running through the building. So the first one we looked at was by program. Then maybe you want to look at the amount of units that are overlooking. So how many of these have kind of windows that are potentially looking at each other. So you could kind of begin to explore the different areas and find out within the building how bad is potential overlooking. So maybe do we sell entire floor plate to one tenant here? So it's not a problem, something like that. And then you could also use something like sliders to begin to filter down some of the options. You can also use parallel coordinates then if you want to kind of do more advanced filtering to hone in on data sets that maybe meet one particular configuration of perhaps a certain floor plate amount and then the amount of facade overlook to kind of find out what that is. And then you could also kind of filter through which programs are potentially can be selected there. So when to filter out mechanical. But as Emil was mentioning, there's lots of other things you can do. So one of the ones we've looked at here, I think this one's widget tests. Let's see if I still have, I don't have the layout anymore. But you can look at different dashboard types, including in this one for daylighting. What am I looking for here? Here we go. So this was like an experimental project done with some Pratt students. We're putting in hyperlinks to actually the kind of Inkscape visualizations that accompany the data here. But then you could go in and kind of filter this 3D model to understand what was going on in the actual model geometry by kind of looking at the directionality or potentially the area of the different panels and then looking at those relationships. And so this is another Mirar model. But as Emil was mentioning, you could also use Colibri or do a batch run of options. And then you can upload images as part of your data set. And then as you begin to filter, you can actually see out of potentially multiple massing configurations, which one meet the particular criteria that you're highlighting. And then you can go in and kind of look at different views of that model or the different models that happen to fall within the criteria. So there's a lot of flexibility for how you can use Thread. It doesn't just have to be in conjunction with Mirar. And as I mentioned earlier, it can also just be with a raw data set. It doesn't actually have to use any kind of model information as well. So are there any questions about Thread? That's just kind of a brief overview.
Will you post the video?
Oh, yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And one thing to mention is for any of these apps, we have kind of Git books getting started for each one that kind of give you a walkthrough on the information. And if you go to the Core Studio YouTube channel, which we should link to on these as well, we've done a whole series of what we call AEC Tech Academies over last year, where we have a lot of different video walkthroughs for Thread, Mirar, Swarm, Grasshopper, a bunch of different tools that kind of go into depth on all these details as well. All right. So The last kind of thing we wanted to explore today was actually using Swarm to, instead of just visualizing the kind of geometry and outputs, to actually go through and have authorship online using Grasshopper as a platform. So I think, Emil, did you want to?
Yes, please. So if you, exactly, let's see if I can share my screen. Great. So yeah, I mean, we sort of already introduced the concept of Swarm, and we're going to try to build a Swarm app. But before that, I just briefly wanted to introduce the kind of web application side of Swarm, basically. So what you're looking at now is the apps marketplace. So each one of these little cards here represents a Swarm app. And a Swarm app is actually nothing else than a Grasshopper definition packed into, like, kind of distributed and packed into an app that you can run in from various kinds of environments, and you can also embed other types of data. But if we just briefly look at the different components here of the dashboard, then you obviously see all these different apps. But then you can also kind of sort these apps into different categories. For instance, this is the public marketplace, so where kind of app developers or app authors have chosen to make their apps public, then they will sort of end up here. Then you also have the option of sharing apps within your organization. For me, that is Thornton Tomasetti, and that is sort of related to the domain that my email address is tied to. And also my apps, which is basically only kind of available for me. But let's select just an app just to sort of show what that is. So what it looks like in the browser is essentially you have a quick little introduction of the app, and the author, obviously, and what platforms it runs on. And then you have like what types of inputs and output parameters that are kind of composed by the app, and then also saved state, which I will talk a little bit more later on. But if you actually run this app right now, what you're going to see is sort of similar to what we've seen earlier today with Mirar, is the kind of 3D viewer. But then also you have the dashboard, or like the configurator controls, essentially, right? So each one of these actually represents a some sort of control that you can alter and change, and actually get the Grasshopper definition in the background actually run and update. So if I were to, let's change inflation intensity or something like that, we should see a message down here, and actually the progress bar moving. And by doing that, you also get an updated geometry, kind of live as soon as it's computed. And you will also see actually the progress here. And of course, I mean, since this is a workshop, and we wanted to sort of tie everything together nicely, we actually have an app created, like a Swarm app created with the tower that we've been playing around with today. And no surprise here, I mean, you get the sort of same inputs and outputs that we've already showed. And if we run this one in the browser, we will also be able to see, essentially the same inputs and outputs. So sometimes it takes a little while for the model to actually load in the first place, and that has to do with what's called the sort of default saved states, which is essentially, when you have a parameter combination set on your model, then you can kind of grab a snapshot out of that, and also kind of save and load the geometry embedded to it, both in terms of the inputs and output. So that can be pretty useful if you actually have, let's say, an input mesh or something, like an input curve in your app. And if you wanted to run that on, in the browser, then it would be hard to do that without actually including the geometry. And in the environment of the browser, obviously that's not straightforward unless you actually have some sort of modeling environment. So that's why I allow you to actually sort of embed geometry within the apps. But if we were to just briefly take a look at what the kind of back end of this looks like, it's actually very similar to what we've already kind of seen today. These are the portions that we've gone through with the attributes and the geometry, and then we have a few extra. Sorry, this is actually this guy. A few extra components for actually creating the swarm app. And I mean, the main thing is actually this swarm builder, which basically will, tell Swarm what are the inputs and outputs of this this app. But I mean, in short, you can say that every app is just a Grasshopper definition that is sort of kind of wrapped up in a nicely presentable package where you have the inputs and outputs, and also the geometry decorated with potential attributes. So here we've actually just included the same attributes, and you'll actually be able to see that if you go back, and you'll notice that you can kind of select the different elements of the model. Right, I think we should also see some layers, which is again just sort of the same features as we saw in Mirar, but it's kind of nice having that in Swarm also, in the sort of generative environment that Swarm is. So I'm gonna try to show you guys how to actually create a Swarm app. Actually, before I do that, any questions, or is there anything you want to add, Dave?
No, I think that's pretty clear.
Sweet. So let's just go back. Actually, before I build the app, I wanted to show you the Rhino plugin. So that we actually mentioned that previous this workshop, but here we obviously run the app from the environment of the browser, which is obviously, pretty beneficial for making it accessible. I mean, for instance, if you actually wanted to share the app with someone that doesn't actually have, like a fully sort of blown 3D modeling environment, you can actually just, copy the link and share it, right? But if you actually wanted to, control more sort of specific aspects of the model that actually includes potentially input geometry and such things, then it's sort of beneficial to have Swarm running inside of here for instance Rhino. So, and that sort of works in the same way. So this is the plugin, the Swarm plugin running in Rhino. So if I just select an app here, then you should be able to see that I can actually run it just as I did in the browser. If I'm able to exactly locate my geometry. So yeah, I mean it's actually pretty similar. I mean the big difference between the web application and the plugins is that we don't have this sort of marketplace embedded in the plugins. It's only for running apps that you have installed. So how do you install an app? It's basically, from the marketplace, you can find an app that you're interested in running or buying essentially, and you click install. And when you do that and you refresh the plugin, it will actually just find the model for you. Doing that, you can run it essentially. And I mean, it's sort of the same thing here. We've done some things to sort of simplify the environment of actually having it in Rhino. So for instance, if you update some of these parameters, it won't actually compute until you actually press the play button. And that could be because some of the computes can be really heavy to run. But if you actually want that feature, you can toggle on live mode, and now it should update as you run the or like change the slider, for instance. So that's sort of the general basics of just sort of running existing apps. But we've really tried to like boil down the essentials of the the Rhino plugins, just to kind of exclude features that you potentially don't want in a Rhino plugin. But it's really just the kind of general apps page where you can see all the apps that are installed, and then you can select an app and run it. If we were to actually attempt to create a new or like build a new Swarm app, I'll try to show you that. So what we're going to do is we're going to press this plus button here, and that will tell actually Grasshopper that, hey, now I want to create a new Swarm app, and it will also tell me here to launch a Swarm Builder component. So let's just start with typing a name. I'm going to say like demo for AEC Tech or something. So here is the definition that we have prepared. And as mentioned, it's sort of the same thing actually that we've seen already a few times in this workshop, but there are a few additional components here. And that is some components that has to do with just constructing attributes. And then we have a few other ones where we actually just inject these attributes into geometric elements. So for this particular Swarm app, we're actually going to prepare it for the run inside of Revit. So what we can do is we can actually grab some of the centerline geometry and attach some attributes to it that are sort of Revit specific. Doing that, we can essentially create BIM elements. I think that's the thing that it's pretty important to not forget. I mean, BIM is nothing else than just some geometry with metadata, right? So we can actually do that inside of this environment. So what's missing here is obviously the Swarm Builder, and you can just actually search for the Swarm Builder, and it should show up. And as soon as you drop it onto the canvas, you will see these two group boxes in the Swarm editor showing up. And then you can start actually feeding in the parameters and inputs you want as inputs, and the same thing for outputs. So I'll actually grab this component and go to the beginning here, and just start actually feeding in, and we should actually see the user interface actually populating itself. So let's do that. So we actually try to do a little bit of you see what you see is what you get for the editor. It's worth noting just that this is sort of a preview. Like, it's not actually running the app as you kind of populate the user interface. It's more just for sort of understanding what the end result would look like. So I'll just go ahead and plug these parameters in. So that's the height, and then the rotation. And let's do the same thing with the base floor heights. And let's do typical floor to floor, slab depth. Let's do the base program and the office repeat. Perfect. Okay, so that might actually be enough for the inputs, right? So let's plug in the outputs. So that's the floor plate outlines, and then wall outlines, and then also the floor volumes. So doing that will sort of allow us to kind of nicely visualize it in the browser also. I think that's pretty much it. I mean, it's sort of designed to be kind of close to how you use Grasshopper, right? I mean, it's just like this. This portion that sort of adds these attributes to it. And then you just have the builder to kind of tell Swarm what are the inputs and outputs. So doing that, I think we're in a pretty good spot where we can basically just press the upload button. So I'll do that. And here it asks me about saved states. So this is actually worth saying a few words about. But I sort of hinted earlier about save states, but it's, imagine you want to grab a snapshot. I mean, similar to the thread dashboards, you know, you have like this huge data set and the different components of the dashboard, and then you want to save a particular kind of selection of this, you know, including filters, including you know, like some color by attributes and stuff like that. This sort of allows you to do the same thing, just saving a particular sort of configuration of the parameters and inputs into a state that can be loaded later. So I'll actually press sure here. So it says app created successfully. I can go to the app. And yeah, that should actually be it in terms of actually you know, building the app. What you can do here also is you can actually show it directly in the browser from the Rhino environment. So as an app author now, when I created it, there are some things that I might want to do to sort of customize it a little bit. You can see that there is sort of a you know, template thumbnail image here. But that's obviously, that's something that can be configured if you wanted to, or if you wanted to rename it, give it a little bit more of a description. The idea here is really that you as an author can sort of you know, present your app in a way that you know, looks good essentially. Same thing with the gallery. If you wanted to do you know, a couple of snapshots of what your app is capable of producing, you can do that. And down here, we have some options in terms of visibility, you know, pricing, platform support, and open source. So that will allow people to actually download the kind of source Grasshopper definition. And yeah, this one is a pretty important one in terms of access, right? So I mentioned the marketplace. So if you toggle this one, basically everyone on Swarm will be able to see the app. And if you do email domain only, then you will share the app with, you know, whatever your email domain refers to. So for me, that's Thornton Tomasetti. So we've sort of thought about a few different use cases of Swarm, and one that we've been using quite a lot is just to be able to share apps, you know, within organizations. So this option gets pretty useful then. And then similar to Swarm, or sorry, similar to Thread and Mirar, you can also invite specific users. You can keep it private, but then invite users specifically. And yeah, I think we mentioned the parameters. So the saved state tell me that I actually have one saved state currently. And for the analytics, it's also as an app user, as an app author, you get this tab as well, which will just, you know, tell you how many users did actually install it, you know, how many times have the app been run, has there been any errors or any sorts of that. You would be able to see that here then. But let's just go ahead and see if we can run the app in the browser. So yeah, this is the default state, and you can see that all the parameters will actually match with whatever I had in Grasshopper when I uploaded it. But if let's see if we can actually try to like tweak something. Let's do the height. Yeah, you can see the different steps here. So solving the Grasshopper definition for this particular one will probably be the most time-consuming portion. But depending on the app, that can actually be different. I mean, for some apps, you know, the solve time is actually pretty short, but the latency in terms of transmitting data can be the heavy portion. And oops, I think it's just got a bit smaller. It's a little awkward actually, but right. I mean,
the value engineered version.
Exactly. I mean, apart from that, it's pretty similar. Like you have the you know, views obviously if you wanted to look it from top, left, whatever. The color by attributes is obviously pretty handy, especially in the sort of parametric environment, right? And then the layers, obviously, if you wanted to emphasize certain sort of aspects of the model. And these will actually persist, even if I have a setting. I might be wrong. I might actually embarrass myself now, but let's try it out. So if I change this with these settings, hopefully they would stick exactly, which is nice, because then you can start actually, comparing different sort of parametric outputs in relation to the metrics they produce in terms
And you can also save the state. So if you're interested in this particular configuration and maybe you want to bring it back to Rhino or even over to Revit, you can go in and give it, as Emil showing, a name. There you go. And now you can actually access that not just on the web again, but in the other platforms, as we'll see in a second.
Exactly. So let's say that I like this particular configuration and I mess around with, some other options, and I get something completely different. I can always actually, if I have a save state, I can go back and kind of reinstate that combination. And another interesting feature actually related to save states is that you can, if I go back to the app actually, back to save states, you're able to share it as well. Like if you have a specific shared state or save states and you want to share it with a particular person, you can invite them to actually, take part of the save state. Obviously, they would have to have the app installed then, or they would have to have access to the app.
And if you make it public, one of the nice things is in the latest version of Swarm, you don't even have to be signed up for Swarm to use it. So if you just want to share it with somebody and you send them that link, they could open it on the web and take a look at it.
Right, exactly. I mean, it's interesting in the way that, the intention with Swarm was not to become a interoperability platform, right? But you can actually run computes, save states in the browser, and then actually open it up in let's say Rhino or in Revit. So in that way, you can actually transfer data between different platforms. So that's also a pretty interesting aspect of Swarm. With that being said, do you have any additional comments, Dave, about Swarm in general?
No, the only thing is maybe if you want to open this one up in Rhino real quick, show how to load that save state in Rhino.
Yeah, let's do it.
Just refresh, and then I can show how to use it in Revit then.
Sure, let's do it. So, yeah, exactly. I probably have to refresh here. And
when it's done, you can probably sort by created.
Oh, true.
How that'll work.
Yeah. Right. And I go to load. And I think I'll just click on it, right?
Yeah, might have to. There you go. That's it.
Yep.
So again, the nice thing about this is if you're, in a meeting or something and you're doing it on a tablet or you're doing it on a browser or whatever, and you find a combination everybody likes, you just save that state, and then you can go back to your desk, load it right in a Rhino, and do whatever your additional operations on top of it are. And you can also, as I think we'll show now, is that you, depending on how you configure it, can bring it into Revit as well.
Yes.
So we've only got 20 minutes left. Maybe we'll jump over that.
Oh, shit. Okay. All right. I wanted to brag here. I want to just create a save state in Rhino state. I think you get the concept. But anyway, all right. I'll stop sharing my screen.
No, it's fine. Okay. So let me share mine real quick. So luckily enough, this last part, kind of bringing it over to Revit, really doesn't take much more. So the first part is, as Emil showed earlier, everyone can see my screen, right?
Yep.
Is one of the attribute types you can put on are Revit attributes. And we'll see here, there's a few other types. There's one for Illustrator and then CSI tools as well. There's a lot for CSI because it's a little more picky. But for Revit, what you can do is for certain geometry types is you can go in and you can assign a category, a family, and a type. And then depending on the type of geometry you associate with that, it will be interpreted by Revit as generating that family type. So to find out what types are supported, and this list has been growing quite a bit, but if we go to Swarm real quick, just to show the help section in Swarm, the little Git book here, is really useful for this because under your desktop clients, you can get a breakdown for Revit and then see oops, sorry, building swarm maps. Platform support, Revit. There's a whole write-up here of basically the different family types that are currently supported, what types of input geometry they take, and then whether they can read, write, or update. So things like grids and stuff like that can be updated, but because the way Revit's API works, they can't be created. You know, there's some funkiness with there, but you can do quite a bit. So because we set our polylines here for our floor plates, we can go in and assign those to be a floor family, and then we're just using the generic standard Revit one. And then for a second set of polylines that are going to represent the walls, I'm going in here and I'm setting the curtain wall as the type and exterior glazing, which is again just one of the default ones that comes with Revit. In addition, for the for the curtain wall, I'm adding in an additional key value, which is the unconnected height. And I'm going to do that so that I can set the individual wall heights for each one of my walls. Now, inside of Swarm on the web, this isn't going to show up as anything. It's just going to show up as a polyline, and then that attribute will be on it. However, if I go to Revit, and in a new architectural project, I'm going to launch Swarm inside of Revit. And this is actually going to launch a secondary application, which will take a second to load up. But if we've configured and set this up correctly, it's going to be as easy as going in, finding my app, which in this case, I'm going to use the sample app from the Google slide presentation, which is AEC Tech 2020 Revit. I'm going to click on that app. I can expand the little previewer to make sure that I'm loading the correct model and I have the correct configuration and everything I want. I could also load save states or whatever I want here. But the two that I set for Revit were floor plate outlines. So if I click floor plate outlines and click download, and give it just a second, and there we go. It's now baked each one of those preview geometries in as actual Revit floor plates, all to correct heights. It's also, if I go back to Swarm, I can do the same thing for the wall outlines and turn those into curtain walls. Now this will take just a little bit longer, but it'll go ahead and bake that geometry out. And since both of those are basically just simple polylines as inputs, they're pretty lightweight and fast to manage on Swarm. And you'll see in Swarm, we have this 3D model, the floor volumes. They're not actually going to be used for anything in Revit, but I put them in here so that I could actually preview in 3D inside of the Swarm web app what was going to happen. So that way I could kind of make sure I had the right building height, right distribution, everything here. And then when this is done, and the funny thing is, most of what's taking the time here right now is not Swarm, it's Revit doing Revit things under the hood, which we all know take an exceedingly long time to finish. But what's really nice about this, and what I was kind of excited about putting together a sample file for the first time and pasted it all over our Slack channels, was instead of actually having to build a curtain wall inside a Grasshopper, which can be a bit of an arduous process, is because I just use the curtain wall family type in here, we'll see in just a second when it's done that all the panelization is managed by Revit, which means if I wanted to take this model and then either export it to Mirar or export it to a DWG, we're going to get our usual Revit warnings about axis and things like that. Like, okay, but here we go. I now have this kind of, concept competition level kind of facade in place, in literally just a minute or a matter of seconds. And so there's certainly a little bit more to do, but I've gone basically from Revit to Grasshopper really quickly. And the nice thing is I can prototype inside, so I could delete all this, load Swarm back up and go, oh, we really need to add 2 more floors. So I'll just add 2 more floors in here and then come back and bake that back out again. And again, because it's a BIM object, I can put it into a full sheet set. So I have another file that I've set up already where all I did was just put in a core and a standard structure and there, just some columns. And I also moved a few floor plates around, things like that. But I'm able to go in and now just create sheets that will basically live update with all the sections and floor plans, depending on if I bake or delete that geometry. And again, that's the really nice thing about using Swarm with Revit, is I can really quickly kind of iterate in this web app, save out multiple options, and then quickly bake them to Revit, go back to Rhino, bake the same thing in Rhino. So I can kind of keep an alignment between my analysis model and my Revit model. And then I can also have some fun in Illustrator as well, if I'd like to use it there, and CSI tools also. So we can come back to Swarm in just a second, but I just wanted to show one of the nice things about this is I could take this model then inside of Revit, and I can use one of the Revit exporters, which I don't have installed right now, and I can just export this up to Mirar. So if I wanted to move this immediately into Mirar and thread and get all the attributes and all the data, it's just a one-click uploader I could use there. Or I can also use Trace, which again is, let's call it experimental at this point, but kind of fun to play with. And what Trace lets you do is, let's say I've just set up 4 quick sheets here, but maybe multiple sheets, is I just click Trace, and right now I get this simple little uploader, which is going to give some more options in the future. But I just select the drawings I want to upload and the project name, and then I click Upload here. And this takes about as long as it takes to PDF a set from Revit, which you know isn't the fastest thing in the world, but it's also not too bad. But if I click to upload, what it's going to do is it's going to upload that model to the Trace web app. And so the sample I put together yesterday, I can click here, and now I'll see those same 4 drawings uploaded there that came from the sheet. And if I go and click on, let's just start with the 3D views, I'm going to see this little progress bar running across the bottom here. And what's happening is it's actually batch loading all the drawing elements in. And so a fun little thing I can do, particularly when on a Zoom call and eating up a lot of bandwidth, is I can watch the drawing get populated bit by bit. But we're not just looking at a PDF or a kind of static version of the drawing. We actually have all of the BIM attributes as part of each drawn element. And each drawn element understands that it's part of a floor or it's part of a mulligan. So as we kind of hover over and click on one of these, we can go in and access all the BIM properties, just like Mirar, but now in the actual drawings. So in this drawing, I could go in and I could color by the floor heights. Or I could color the model by the type. So we'll see the difference between our different family types in here. And if yellow on white isn't really easy to read, just like with Mirar, I can go in under my options. And in this case, I'll change my background color. Maybe make it a little darker gray. And I'll also go in to my settings and maybe change the color by color to be something that's a little more legible. That gradient there. And so now I don't just have the drawing set, but I have the drawing set with all of the original Revit data in there, which means I can go in and also check things like I'd like to know whether or not this is paper space or model space, so I can see, you know, what was drawn or what's actually coming from the model in a particular file or sheet up here. So you can kind of begin to use this for QA/QC as well, or redlining. And I can also go in to those drawings, and then I could go and say, well, let's see the same information potentially on the elevations. So again, very much alpha, should be with a capital A here. So we watch this load. It's going to take a little bit of time to load now. Again, these are things we're working on improving. But once all of my kind of elevations come in, I'll be able to kind of click on those attributes and filter them as well. So again, the nice thing is like Mirar, where you're getting model geometry and model data, now you're kind of getting something you don't have a lot of other places you can get access to, which is all of the kind of building model information, the BIM data, directly on the drawings themselves. So we'll just wait for that one to filter. And then I was going to put some fun little thing here where you could put an attribute on there to color by each face inside of Swarm, but I ran out of time to put that together. But one of the nice things is with Swarm, you could build attributes into your families. Like if you wanted to know orientation or height or tilt angle or any other information that's kind of missing from a typical Revit attribute. And kind of like the other interoperability solutions that are out there, you could write data to that, but then you could also go in and visualize that data. Let's see if we can see something more interesting here. Maybe type. There we go. Maybe we're back to that ugly color scheme. But again, that's kind of where what Trace is and where Trace is at. So right now it's pretty much kind of a 1 to 2 click exporter out of Revit. And then you can kind of interact with these models or drawings. And again, it's very early days, so it only has one setting, which is you can share it with someone else. So someone else has signed up for Trace. But eventually this will kind of get to the same functionality as Mirar with kind of public sharing and distribution. And some of the interesting things that are coming to Trace as well is because all this data comes from Revit, you're going to have the ability inside of Trace to actually click on one of those drawn elements and see anywhere else in the document sets that it exists. So you could cross-check if a wall is documented in plan, section, detail, all those different things as well. So that's just a little bit of a preview of Trace, and then also a little bit of a preview of using Swarm inside of Revit. Are there any questions about those?
Or general Swarm questions, or questions about the workshop in general. Yeah.
So if not, because we have a whole 7 minutes left, one of the things I can show that's kind of off the program is just give a little preview, how you could actually use this with Illustrator as well. So, if you were kind of really savvy with the way this was set up, you could create an app that works in Revit, Illustrator, Rhino across all three, or you can kind of design apps specifically for each application and use the web editor. So the same way that we have Swarm for Revit, I can also create just a quick document in Illustrator. And then under my panels, for my workspaces, or sorry, extensions, that's what I'm looking for. I can launch Swarm. Fingers crossed, because I haven't used this. Yep. We'll see if it works. This is a problem with messing with all my settings. I think by deleting my UI earlier.
Right.
Screwed this up.
Do you have it open in Revit?
Yes, actually.
Okay, that might
be why.
Yeah, because that's the thing. It's actually the same application getting launched from Revit as it is from Illustrator. It's just sort of a different pipeline, basically. The one from the interface to Revit, and then from the interface to Illustrator.
Yeah, let me try that one more time.
Yeah, it's pretty cool, especially combining the Make 2D. Is it called Make 2D? Yeah, Make 2D from Rhino that is available. I think that's in Rhino 7, right? Where you can actually do it directly in Grasshopper, which is pretty neat. Because then you can produce all these like pretty elevations directly from a Swarm app, and then just dump it into Illustrator right away.
Okay, so we'll try this one more time, and if it doesn't work.
I was gonna say, you're a brave man, Dave.
Live demoing on an untested live demo. Yeah. It's also bad because I wrote the thing, so if it isn't working, it's my fault. All right, let's try it one more time. Nope.
Okay. All right, we'll have to look into that. Yeah.
Oh, I think I just need to reinstall. I probably have a debug version.
All right. Yeah.
24.1. Yeah. I just have to reinstall probably.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, on that disappointing note.
Anticlimax ending.
Yeah.
No, that's good.
But actually, let me do this just to kind of show what is available for that. Is if we just go to the help here for the Illustrator client, just to give a preview, is you can essentially run your apps just like we've seen before, but you can run it inside of Illustrator. So you can interact with geometry in Illustrator using it either as an input or an output, and then actually, run like a Grasshopper metaball simulation and automatically output it inside of inside of Illustrator. Or if we look in, I think it's under the client support, right? So here, this little GIF will basically show. So you could take geometry from Illustrator, bring it in as an input to Swarm, run Swarm, choose the layer you want to bake to, and then just bake your results out to Illustrator. There you go. You saw it for half a second there. And then I think this one also shows baking out different geometry types. So you can do polylines, circles, lines, and you can go through and bake out that geometry. Again, different layers if you want, including splines come through. And so that's just a little geometry preview. And then, you know, one of the examples, what I was going to show is you could do something like create a 3D mesh and then do something like running contour lines to get topo lines, and then bake that straight out to Illustrator with kind of graphics and colors automatically included. So it just kind of helps for illustrative purposes and those types of workflows. So that's kind of it for today's workshop.
Any general thoughts? Anything that caught your attention, or anything you liked specifically, or
Didn't?
So, or didn't exactly?
If nobody else had any comments, I just wanted to say thank you, David. Thank you, Emil. It's really, really impressive set of tools. I must admit, I wasn't following along live actually in Grasshopper, but I was obviously just kind of watching yourselves work with them. I didn't quite have time to install the plugins beforehand, but
Sure.
yeah, it's obviously very impressive. I'm interested, like how many of you are in core now? Did you say at the start something like 20 of you?
There's 20 total, but it's a mix between core modeling and then artificial intelligence group, AI group, and then application development. So application development, I think, is about 8 to 12 total.
Okay.
Yeah, but part of that, like the web app team, I think is about 6 maybe, and then several others are kind of .NET specialists working for the for TT development as well.
Sure. Yeah, it's I mean, some really, really impressive output across the tools. And it's quite funny, like I was thinking it's not a technology demonstration without at least one of the tools failing.
We hit that mark on every tool, so
Absolutely.
great.
Yeah, absolutely. Badge of honor.
So yeah, I mean, to that, the channels are going to be open even after AEC Tech. So if you have any specific questions, you want to try something out afterwards, please feel free to follow up there, or in-person emails, Slack, etc. We're always happy to do continued run-throughs, or even in offices and groups. If you'd like to have a kind of follow-up workshop, we do those pretty frequently as well. So always happy to follow up.
Absolutely. Yeah.
For the presentation, yeah, it's great.
Yeah, second that for sure. Thank you guys. Very helpful and very impressive all around. So
Thanks.
All right. Well, if there's no other questions, we're at exactly 12:01. Good timing. A little rushed at the end, but thank you everyone for participating. Really happy to see everyone's sticking through it, and hopefully you got some interest and inspiration out of it to try some of these things out and tell us everything you find wrong with it. So we look forward to hearing back about that. So thank you very much.
Thanks all.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks a lot.